It's breakfast time at the Pollock household, and I'm about to eat a meal that nearly killed me 17 years ago. It was about 17 years ago that I had a meal like this one. I had a big bowl of Raisin Nut Bran. And I thought I was being a good boy. I thought I was eating healthy, and it looks healthy. I mean, we've got raisins and bran, and it just looks like a real crunchy, healthy cereal. I was having blood sugar problems even in those days. In fact, I was having much worse blood sugar problems than I do now. But I didn't have a clue what was really going on. And I thought, as I said, I was doing myself a favor by eating healthy. What I didn't realize was that eating a bowl like this of a large bowl of this Raisin Nut Bran, I was ingesting around 100 grams of carbohydrates. When you check the carbs on this cereal, you find that it lists 40 grams of carbs and 6 grams of fiber. So net grams, that would be 34 grams. You may say, well, 34 grams of carbs doesn't sound too bad. The problem is when you look at what they're describing, it's a serving size of 3/4 of a cup. This is a cup, and nobody would eat this little bit of cereal, and it's not even a full cup. That 34 grams of carbs represents 3/4 of one of these, which means that for a large bowl where you're going to have probably 2 of these, this one has over 2 cups in it, you're getting close to 80-some grams of carbs. Add the milk to it, you're up to about 100. So I'm going to do something I would normally never do, and I haven't done in 17 years. After I had this meal of Raisin Nut Bran, it was on a Sunday morning. I went to church, as I normally do on Sunday morning with my family. I sat through the church service. I got up just a couple minutes before they were going to dismiss. I wanted to go to the bookstore and get there early, and I got close to the bathroom and I fainted. I felt so weak as I made that trek as I walked, and I knew I was about to faint. And I leaned up against a wall. I slid down. The next thing I knew, I woke up, and a nurse was holding my head, and they had called for the paramedics. When they tested me, my blood sugar read low. It didn't even give a number. It was so low that it just read the words LO. It was this very meal that did it. One bowl. It was a large bowl, granted, but it was one bowl of this Raisin Nut Bran that did it to me. So I'm going to repeat that. You may say that's a dangerous thing. Well, we'll talk about why it's not going to be quite so dangerous this time. I just checked my blood sugar, and it's at 100 right now. That's my fasting blood sugar. And so after I eat this, we'll check it again at the 1 hour mark, and we'll see what this does. At the time, I wasn't testing my blood sugar much. I didn't realize what was happening with me. I was just pretty much ignorant. I knew something was going on, and I figured it was connected to blood sugar, but I didn't know what. I've got a lot more knowledge now, but for the sake of research, I'm going to repeat that same meal today. So I'll see you in a little over an hour, and we'll see what this same meal will do to me today, 17 years later. And I know it's not going to be real kind to my blood sugar. It's been an hour since I finished that cereal, that 100-gram bowl of Raisin Nut Bran, actually probably about 85, 88 grams of carbs, and then another 12 grams of milk carbs. So it's time to test. It's a little scary. Remember, the last time I ate that meal, I fainted about 4 or 5 hours later. I didn't know at the time what was happening. I now know what was almost surely happening was that my blood had soared after eating that bowl for a couple of hours, and then my pancreas had dumped out all kinds of insulin, and then my blood sugar started dropping until it read low. And when your blood sugar is so low that it doesn't even give you a number, it just gives you a low signal, you're not far from dying. I mean, you can't afford to have blood sugar that low. So right now, it's just been an hour. It's not going to be low. It's going to be high. How high? I don't know. It's been 17 years. Maybe I'm better than I was then. I don't think I'm much worse, but we'll see. So you can watch with me on video. I'll be almost as surprised as you to find out what it is. I don't know. Although, as I said, I think I do understand that it's going to be high. It's not going to be the 100 that it was before I tested. And it is ready for some blood. And I don't have much problem with providing blood anymore. Some people, when they first start doing this, need a little help. But let's see what we get here. And there we go. I think you can see that 196. Well, I've had higher, but 196 is definitely way too high. So what do we learn from this? We learned that high carb is not so good for people with insulin resistance. You may wonder, are you not worried that the same thing's going to happen to you this time, that you'll end up fainting? I'm not too worried, and the reason is I know now what I can do about that. I can have a little extra food about 2.5 to 3 hours in to this process, and that will keep it from just dropping. And then especially if it's kind of a low carb but high protein type food, it'll enable my blood sugar levels to just ease down into the normal range. So I'm not too worried about fainting this time. I will test myself again in a few hours. But the point is, it's still not good for me. It wasn't good for me 17 years ago. It's not good for me now, despite the fact that it is touted as a healthy cereal, a heart-healthy cereal. It's nutty, it's crunchy, it's got bran, it's got raisins. Raisins are a fruit. By a lot of people's standards, it should be one of the best, healthiest foods in the world. But in reality, for a diabetic, it is most decidedly not. Now, we're going to come back probably tomorrow, and I'll test myself and show you how I do it these days with cereal. I have not given up on cereal, but I've made some very definite modifications, and I don't do it the way I used to, and I get much better results. We got a 196 this time as a peak. We went from 100 to 196, a little over an hour. That's a significant rise. That's not good for us, and I probably will never eat that cereal again. It's not going to stay around and get eaten. It's going to get thrown. But tomorrow we'll show you how I do it these days, and we're going to see a lot lower numbers. It is breakfast time once again here at the Pollock household, and as I did yesterday, I'm going to enjoy some cereal. Maybe I shouldn't say enjoy as it relates to yesterday, because I knew it was going to drive my blood sugar crazy, and it did. That high-carb Raisin Nut Bran cereal took it from 100 before the meal up to 196 an hour after the meal. That was the very cereal that caused me to faint about 17 years ago, as my blood sugar skyrocketed high for a while and then plunged very low. I checked it yesterday, 196. I checked it a few hours into it, and it was starting to go too low. It got down to 73, which is unnatural for me. That is not my base blood sugar level. So it was going low, but I had a snack, and that kind of leveled things off, so I didn't faint. I didn't come close to it. I knew what to do, but 17 years ago I didn't. This time, however, I'm going to show you what I do these days. I don't eat Raisin Nut Bran, but what I've done is I've gone through the grocery stores looking for the lowest possible carb cereal that I could find. And the sad truth is there really is no low-carb cereal on your typical grocery store shelves these days. There was a time when they sold some, when low-carb was a little bit more fashionable than it is today. Today there is no low-carb cereal, but the closest I could come would be the Cheerios-type cereal. This is not Cheerios, this is Toasted Oats, which is a generic version of it. But most all these Cheerios-type cereals are relatively low in carbs compared to the others. Not really low in carbs, mind you, but relatively low in carbs. And then this Special K protein cereal is also relatively low in carbs. The sad thing about this is they had a different version of it some years ago, and it was lower still, and it wasn't as sweet. And they decided to change the formula, and they made it sweeter and added more sugar to it, so it's better than most cereals, but it's not great. So these are the two best I can find. Maybe you can do better at your local grocery store, but at the stores where I shop, this is the best I can find. Granted, I could order some really seriously low-carb cereal from the internet, but the problem there is it gets really, really expensive, and I'm such a cheap guy that if I can get away with not having to do that, I'll try to do it. So how do I do it? Well, first of all, you'll notice the bowl I'm using today is smaller than the bowl I used yesterday. Yesterday I had a big old helping of that Raisin Nut Bran. Today it's going to be less. In fact, I'm not even going to fill this bowl up. So that's for starters. And that's going to be the limit of my cereal for this morning. So we will fill this up about two-thirds, three-fourths full and stop there. Now, you may say, you're not getting a lot of cereal. No, I'm not. And you just can't. Cereal is grain, made out of grain. There's no cereal made out of steak or eggs or anything like that. It's all grain and it's all carbs pretty much. So there's just no way you can pig out on cereal. If your dream and your desire is, show me a way I can just eat as much cereal as I want, 3-4 bowls, forget it, unless you order off the internet and get some really, really low-carb cereal. But for this, you can't do it. So this is the most I can do. Now, to make things a little nicer for me, and you don't want to leave the table being famished. You've got to at least get relatively full. And so to do that, I'm going to eat some peanuts as well. And so the peanuts, I didn't put them out, but I'll get them. But the peanuts plus the cereal will fill me up. But if I just ate this little small bowl of cereal, it would not. Now, there's one other thing I do. Besides having a smaller bowl of cereal, I make my own milk. This is my version of milk, and it's much lower in carbs than the milk you buy, again, at the store. This is heavy whipping cream. There's several versions of it you can buy. And you can make a very low-carb milk by using about a third part heavy whipping cream, or maybe a fourth part. It doesn't take much because it is so rich and thick, and it doesn't have that many carbs to start with. Some versions of it have none. They don't list any at all. And then you add water. And so by the time you've added water, which the water has no carbs at all, to your heavy whipping cream, you've got a milk that is still rich and nice, and yet it is low in carbs. So I've cut down from 12 grams of carbs, which I would be getting if I had the regular milk, to, I don't know, maybe 3 grams of carbs. So you save every carb gram you can. So less cereal, lower carb milk. I add some peanuts to help fill me up, and there is my breakfast. Now, there is a certain principle involved here that we all need to see, and that is the key to getting your blood sugar under control is to go light on the high carb stuff. Doesn't mean you have to do away with it necessarily, but you go light on the high carb stuff and you go heavier on the low carb stuff. So in the case of cereal, it's a high carb food. I can't eat that much. Believe me, I would love to eat 2 bowls, maybe 3 sometimes. I can't do it. So I go light on the high carb stuff. And even though this is the lowest carb I can find, it's still relatively high carb. And then peanuts are a low carb, high fiber food that really doesn't do much at all to blood sugar. So I add that. If I went to somebody who was serving spaghetti and salad, I'd do exactly the same. The answer would be simple. Go ahead and eat the spaghetti. Just don't eat very much. Just have a low, just a small amount of it. And then go big on the salad. So you go big on the low carb stuff, you go light on the high carb stuff. Same thing with the cereal. I just can't eat that much, but at least I get the taste. You might say, why don't you give it up altogether? Well, I probably should, but I've always loved cereal, and I just can't quite bring myself to totally give up on cereal. I like the taste of it that much. So what I do is I just have a small amount, have some peanuts, drink my coffee, and I do okay. We're going to see. I'm going to test myself before I actually eat this, and then we'll come back and test myself once again and see what this does to my blood sugar. Remember, the high-carb cereal, the Raisin Nut Bran, took it from 100 to 196, almost a 100-point rise in a little over an hour. This, I'm almost positive, will not do that, but we'll see. So I'll see you in about an hour, and I'll report what the difference is, and you can find out that this is going to work a lot better than the high-carb version. My timer has told me it's been an hour since I finished my cereal and peanuts and coffee. And by the way, you really need to use a timer when you do these post-meal tests. I couldn't tell you how many times I have not used a timer and forgotten when an hour was up. Sometimes I would look at my watch and say, okay, at such and such a time, I'll test myself. And half the time or more I forget. So I've gotten to the point where I just always use a timer. So we're going to find out if this low-carb cereal, relatively low-carb, compared to all the others, it's low-carb. It's not really low-carb at all. But anyway, it's definitely a lot less carbs that I'm dealing with than I did yesterday. We're going to find if this made a difference. And see what we get here. And the score is 128. Well, 128 is pretty good. It's definitely a lot better than 196. Yesterday with the Raisin Nut Bran, very high carb cereal, I was ingesting about 100 grams of carbs or maybe a little more, and it soared to 196. Today, 128, much, much better. But even with that, I don't like to eat cereal a lot because I know it's carbs, carbs, and more carbs, and so I limit myself to how many times I'll have cereal. Usually once a week is what I do. Now you may wonder, will this work for me? So should I start eating these cereals and have a little peanuts and do it just the way you do? No, don't do it the way I do. Find out for yourself what works for you. What works for me may not work for you. You may not even be able to handle this much cereal. You may have to cut it down more or give it up altogether. Maybe you can handle more, but you'll only know when you start testing and talking to your doctor. So I don't do these videos and show these tests to try to tell you, do it just the way I do it. That would be foolish. I'm trying to inspire you to let you know you can test yourself. You can find out what works for you. And the key thing, no matter what you do, whether you eat cereal or you eat eggs for breakfast or you eat a salad for breakfast, or however you set your dietary plan, the key thing is keep those numbers fairly close to normal range. Don't let them soar into the 160s, 170s, 200s, 250s. Don't let that happen. You're damaging your body. And one of the ways you can make sure it doesn't happen is by doing these post-meal tests. So I'm a happy guy. I was able to enjoy cereal. Granted, it wasn't as much as I might have wanted, but I got a good sweet taste of cereal. I had a few peanuts, had some coffee, and I'm good for until lunch. And my blood sugar rose to 128. Not likely that it's going to rise any higher. It'll probably start dropping from this point because this is about my peak for cereal. So until lunchtime, I'm good. And if I behave myself at lunchtime, I'll be good until supper time. And if I behave myself at supper time, I'll be good till the next breakfast. And you put together a string of these kind of days and these kind of weeks and months and years and decades, and you're off to a lifetime of good health and freedom from diabetic complications.